Good morning. Good morning. You're all very welcome. Unfortunately, we have a number of our choir members have tested positive, so we have a much shorter service this morning, and we've taken some precautionary measures. So we will not have our harvest service, sorry to say that, this morning. Our harvest service, as you can see, there's no fruit on the table and so forth. Our harvest service will be next Sunday at 11:30. So this morning we won't have any singing in the church. We're only going to have one hymn, but we would ask people not to sing. The words will come up on the screen, so you can sing them in your head or you can mime them, but don't sing them out loud, just as a precautionary measure this week. And also, we will not have refreshments at the end of the service. Sorry about that. And we would ask people at the end of the service to leave the church, and if you want to chat outside, even though it's cold. It's better not to stay in the building. So they're the precautionary measures we are taking this morning. We're sorry about no refreshments, because I know one of the big attractions to All Souls is never the sermon. It's always the good coffee and the brownies, etc. So, however, normal service will resume next Sunday. So as I said, we won't have any singing this week. Let us prepare ourselves for meditation and prayer. Loving God, we give thanks to you today. We bless your name together. Giver of kindness and steadfast love. Your faithfulness endures from generation to generation. And as we gather together today, fill our minds and our mouths with a generous spirit. Guard our thoughts and our heart, that we may embrace your love in our work. Your loving name, your inclusive love, is above all other names, the love above all other loves. Bless our deliberations and guide us in your ways with each other. And may we also wish all our leaders, all the world leaders gathering in Glasgow to discuss issues around environment, climate change, and the care of our planet. We ask that they be blessed with wisdom, understanding, and compassion. Amen. Alister.
Our first reading this morning, I suppose, isn't such a reading. It's a little bit of show and tell, shall we say. For some reason this week, memories have been coming back to me about different times in my life. And I'm not quite sure whether it's because harvest approaches and we give thanks for all the good gifts that come from above. Or maybe it's because November traditionally to us all is a month of remembrance. And I've been thinking about what to say at the remembrance service I lead in Hollywood this year. Or maybe it's because our churches have communion and the Lord's Supper in November, and it's that idea of remembrance. So I don't know if many of you have a bottom drawer or a box hidden somewhere that you keep things from your past in. As Colin reminds me, my treasured possessions that I have at home. But I thought I would share some with you. And this is where these screens come in great, because I can do social distancing and look at things like my mother kept the card from when I was born and my first little hat which had been knitted for me all those years ago. And if you're fast with your maths, you can work out what age I am. Now, I'm sure you all have in the box these photographs from when you were a child. Isn't that a sweet face? Hasn't changed much, sure it hasn't. And many of you maybe had, if you were a certain age, one of those ties that's sitting rather perfectly, but one of those ties that used to be in an elastic. So it always sat perfectly. That was my primary school photograph. I moved a little onwards then to the secondary school there, and still perfect there. How many of you, and this is where I think it's important thinking about memories and what they mean to life, how many can remember their first single that they bought? Now, if you're good, you can read that as the Goombay Dance Band and 7 Tears Are Flowing to the River. How many people have their first record that they bought? Okay, so I'm the only one that keeps things like this, okay? Now, this is my rather wearied teddy, Snowy. Kids, I bet you've got a teddy bear as well, and this teddy bear is probably about 10 times the age you were, or you are. But this teddy bear accompanied me when I went into hospital at the age of 10 for open heart surgery. And Snowy came with me, even has his little armband on there from when he was in hospital. He's a bit dog-haired, but he's still there, and I still have him. Memories of times when I was in hospital, and at night I was left with Snowy and a personal cassette player with Dana on it, and to me everything was beautiful. Who would have kept their first phone, their first mobile phone? No? Am I the only one that keeps these memories? The brick, as many people affectionately call it. And it was strange, I was talking to someone during the week, and I think that's where all these memories come about. I was saying about still having my first phone. From life, this little thing that says the 21st anniversary of the Courtyard Theatre. Well, that was my first job in the Courtyard Theatre on the opening night when it first opened, and we celebrated many times from that. But that's a recollection of my first job and my first paid career. Now this one, and I think this is what kind of brought it to light. I was in here the other night working with the system to look at, we now have Wi-Fi in the church. Yes, that's taken a while, Monica, but we now have Wi-Fi. And so I was playing around with the Wi-Fi, and I also wanted to work out how we could show videos and DVDs, which I was able to do. And one of the DVDs I had was this one. And for many newbies to All Souls, they won't realise that in 2011 we had our own pantomime starring our very own cast. I was miscast, I have to say, as an ugly sister. Buttons up there in the pulpit. But it was lovely watching it, but it was mixed with emotions, because there are two people in the panto that are no longer with us, Mark Mooney and Suzanne Bell. And it's very emotive when you start and watch things. There were so many laughs, so many jokes in it, so many people you wouldn't maybe recognise now from their character. But I think that's what really got me thinking about our memories. And our memories are important to us. People are important to us. And as we're told within the scripture, love God and love your neighbour. And your neighbour will have had a part to play in all those memories, whether they're happy, whether they're sad. And I think today, as we reflect on some of our congregation being ill, that it's times like this that we remember good times, happy times, and the part that people play within your life and within your faith life. And so that is my reading for today.
Thank you, Alister. And now, Trevor. Thank you, Trevor. Last Monday, I travelled down to Dublin, sadly, for a funeral of a good friend of mine, Fran Sheridan. And although I knew Fran, I knew her husband, Jim Sheridan, much better. I was involved many years ago in the Project Arts Centre in Dublin with Jim and his brother Peter Sheridan. Some of you will know Jim Sheridan from his film My Left Foot, which won an Oscar, and In the Name of the Father. And of course, Jim has had a lot of other successes with films, and his brother Peter in theatre. So I travelled down to St. Mary's in Haddington Road for the funeral mass, and I met an awful lot of people there who I'd known in the past, many of them people who have spent their life working in theatre, to which one of them actually said to me, "Chris, haven't seen you for years. Are you still working as an actor?" And I said, "No, I'm a church minister now." And he said, "Oh, so you are then." And I leave that with you, but one of the pieces of music sang in the church was "A Rainy Night in Soho" by the Pogues. Now, Fran's favourite song was "Up a Lazy River," which he used to love to sing to her 3 daughters. But Jim and Fran's favourite song together was "A Rainy Night in Soho." Now, the fact that we're not singing in the church today, I won't sing it. The fact that I can't sing has got nothing to do with it. But I promise someday I will attempt to sing this song for you. The words are beautiful, and it's "A Rainy Night in Soho" from the Pogues. I've been loving you a long time, down all the years, down all the days. And I've cried for you for all your troubles, smiled at your funny little ways. We watched our friends grow up together, and we saw them as they fell. Some of them fell into heaven, some of them fell into hell. I took shelter from a shower, and I stepped into your arms on a rainy night in Soho. The wind was whistling all its charms. I sang you all my sorrows. You told me all your joys. Whatever happened to that old song, to all those little girls and boys? Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, the ginger lady by my bed, covered in a cloak of silence. I'd hear you talking in my head. I'm not singing for the future. I'm not dreaming for the past. I'm not talking of the first times. I never think about the last. Now the song is nearly over. We may never find out what it means. Still, there's a light I hold before me. You're the measure of my dreams, the measure of my dreams. For Fran and Jim. I was intrigued, Alister, as you were showing some of your memorabilia, or if you ever become a saint, they will be your attributes. You'll have them around you. The painter will paint them around you. And I was thinking, because I was down in Dublin a few weeks ago visiting my sister, and she said, I found a photograph of you, meaning moi, and it was taken when you were a little baby. And when I was a baby, I had a big mop of curly blonde hair. So she showed me this photograph, and she said to me, have a look on the back and see who signed it. So I turned it round. I don't know if I should really tell you this now, but I turned it round and looked, and it was signed by Eamon de Valera. Does anybody know Eamon de Valera? Well, Eamon de Valera had signed it. And I was intrigued by that. Now, Alister mentioned that in the pantomime, what year was it, 2011? 2011, in the pantomime that we did, the All Souls, Cinderella, and you played one of the ugly sisters, and I played buttons. Now, the only reason I got the part of buttons was, believe it or not, I still had the costume from the days that I did Panto in Dublin. So I still had my buttons costume. So the fact that I still had the costume was reason enough to give me the part. And I'll just tell you a little story about that. Because years ago when I lived in Dublin, and I was very involved in just about every social change campaign you can imagine. The whole issue around divorce, women's reproductive rights, all of those, myself and other people that I was close to got involved in those campaigns. Many of you up here don't realize that it's only in the recent years that the Republic of Ireland has become quite a liberal place. Prior to that, there was no divorce, no contraception, no women's reproductive rights, and marriage was to get married, or there was no marriage in a Protestant Catholic in a Catholic church. You had to go to a side altar in the church, and the Protestant partner had to sign what was called the Nea Temera decree, that the children would be brought up Catholic. All of that has changed to some extent in the last number of years. So why I'm telling you this is, I was involved in all those campaigns, heavily involved. I was even involved, even though I didn't need one, I was involved in the Divorce Action Campaign. I was the chair of the Dún Laoghaire Divorce Action Campaign. And around the same time that I was speaking at public meetings, I was also playing buttons in a local pantomime, and then speaking at public meetings on why we needed divorce. And one night I was speaking at a very well-attended meeting, and a young woman walked in with her little girl, and they sat right up at the front of the meeting. And when I stood up to speak, the little girl shrieked and said, "Look, Mummy, it's buttons." Anyway, and now I'm here in All Souls. And of course, we're at that time of the year where All Souls is a holy day, a religious day. Now, in the Catholic Church, of course, when I was a youngster and a Catholic, we prayed on All Souls Day for the souls to be released from purgatory. Now, I know Protestants didn't do that, but we did. We prayed for the souls to be released in purgatory. I can only assume all our prayers were incredibly successful, because there are no souls left in purgatory. So we did a good job on that one. But here in All Souls Church, we understand All Souls in a different way. Ezekiel, all souls are mine, said the Lord. So it's really just taking that line, to some extent, out of context, and flagging it up as a mission statement, a strapline, as advertising people would say nowadays. All souls are mine, said the Lord. Meaning that all souls are welcomed here. Whoever you are, you're welcomed in this building. And when you look around at this church, for some of you who are here for the first time, or who have been coming and don't know that much about the building and its history, you'll note at the back, on the back wall, there's some script which mentions that it was built in 1896. But it had lots of life, at least the congregation had, before that particular year. The congregation goes back 300 years down to Rosemary Street. If you think of the church on Rosemary Street, the non-subscribing church on Rosemary Street, this congregation was in a building behind that. And it's believed that's where the escaped famous slave from America, Frederick Douglass, was a guest and spoke outside our congregational church many, many years ago. And now we've ended up here. And there are books about our congregation at the front door, written by Dr. Roger Courtney, which give you great insight into the history of this congregation. So this building has been here 1896, lived through the signing of the Ulster Covenant. I think 600 men signed the Ulster Covenant in our hall across the way. And of course the congregation were here during the First World War, and the link with that is you can see there are two flags. The pale blue flags are the RAF Association, and Dr. Agnew, who was a minister here, very prominent minister, served in the Flying Air Corps in the First World War, and the RAF didn't come into being until 1918, and Dr. Agnew was one of the main patrons of the association. So you can see beside our rainbow flag are two flags dedicated to the RAF Association. The rainbow flag is part of the tradition of this congregation, of social change, of radical change. Have Frederick Douglass speaking at our church, and the association this church had for many years with the labour movement and the trade union movement, and now, of course, for social change. And the church survived the Spanish flu. I don't know, I was trying to search through minutes because we closed down during this pandemic, but there are no mentions of the church ever closing during the Spanish flu. And yet we had to close on two separate periods at the advice of the government to close during the recent pandemic for 2 periods. During the Second World War, and there's mention just down on the porch there was the York Street congregation. And their church was bombed twice during the Belfast Blitz. And the church was destroyed. You can see a photograph down there where it was bombed after the first time, and with Dr. Agnew they're trying to put the building back together again. But then German bombers decided to return and bomb Belfast for a second night, leading to the loss of over 1,000 lives and many, many people homeless and injured, and our church devastated. In some ways, it was a strange blessing, because the congregation here had this fine big building, but no congregation. There was only a handful of people here, and they had no minister. So when York Street was bombed, the York Street congregation came up here in 1941 or 42, I'm not completely clear. And Dr. Agnew was the minister right up until 1977. Now, in true Presbyterian fashion, when York Street came up here, they survived till 2004 as separate congregations. That doesn't surprise me. That is a true Presbyterian thing to do. So the church survived because the congregation here needed a minister, or needed a congregation and a minister, and the York Street congregation needed a home. So the coming together was one of joy and celebration, and it led to Dr. Agnew becoming one of the most noted preachers in the city of Belfast. Every year he used to travel over to Chicago to preach in a liberal church in the northern borough of Chicago to about 4,000 people on a Sunday, and he would visit there for a month during the summer period. I remember one time I was at a dinner organized by the newspaper, the newsletter, and I was sitting beside Dr. Paisley. And we got chatting about this church and about non-subscribers, or Unitarians, as he would refer. He referred to them as Unitarians who were not Christian. They may be Unitarian, but they're not Christian. And I said to him, have you ever visited our church? Oh, he said, on many an occasion, on a Sunday, I would attend All Souls when I was a young man. And I said, for what? To watch Dr. Agnew preach. He said he was one of the best preachers I've ever seen. And I said, and what did you think what he was preaching? Liberal nonsense. But he could preach it. So you can blame us to some extent that he took some of his tips on preaching from Dr. Agnew. Now I'll finish with this because over on our war memorial there's a name, Emma Duffin. And Emma served as a VAD in the VAD, the Voluntary Aid Detachment in the First World War. And she served before that in Egypt, and then she served as a VAD nurse. Some people would argue that they were not actually nurses, the Voluntary Aid Detachment, but they worked with the wounded. And Emma was an amazing young woman. She was a young woman of about 19 years of age, and prior to the First World War, she had worked in Germany as an au pair. Now, when you think at that time, going back that time, that was quite something for a young woman to do from Belfast, to go and work as an au pair in Germany before the First World War. Not that she knew there was going to be a First World War. However, when she worked at the front as a nurse, she generally ended up attending young German soldiers who were severely injured, who were brought into the first aid center. And there is a book about Emma, and there's some harrowing stories, one in particular of a young German soldier who's close to death and thinks Emma is his girlfriend. And of course, the fact that she spoke German she was in a position to give comfort to this young man before he died. So she was an amazing woman. And in the Second World War, when Belfast was bombed, she was again out nursing the sick and the injured during the Blitz. She was related, this is the wonderful thing that you find about these churches, she was related to the Andrews family, he who designed the Titanic, and this was the last church that John Andrews Jr. worshipped in before sailing on the Titanic. So she was related to him, and she was related to Thomas Drennan, the United Irishman. So quite a family. So there's some of the celebrations of people associated with this church. And why I wanted to share that with you this morning is because some of you are new to this church, some of you today is your first day, and I wanted you to know a little bit about the history and tradition of the building you've entered. And I'd like to finish with a few words that I've used often in this building, because I think they say an awful lot about the love that existed in this building over all those years. And it's called a place of meeting. Out of wood and stone, out of dreams and sacrifice, the people build a home. Out of the work of their hands and hearts and minds, the people fashioned a symbol and a reality. May this house be truly a place of meeting, meeting one with another in warmth and joy and openness, meeting one with another in courage and love and trust. May the rain fall gently on this house, the sun shine warmly, The winds blow softly and blessed as a place of joy, a place of love, a place of peace. Amen.
And now our closing blessing. The world now is too dangerous and too beautiful for anything but love. May our eyes be so blessed so that you can see God in everyone. May our ears be so open that you can hear the cry of the poor. May our hands be so blessed that everything we touch is a sacrament. May our lips speak so that nothing but the truth of love is apparent. May our feet be so blessed that we run to those who need us. And may our hearts be so opened, so set on fire, that your love changes everything. Go in peace and love until we meet again. Amen.